can go wrong will go wrong. Good day, good evening, salutations, everybody. And welcome back. It's been a little while since we've opened the Cosmic Doctrine, but we are here tonight to go over Chapter 8 in Greer's book, actually, on the commentary on the Cosmic Doctrine. Today, we will be discussing the creation of the universe, which is a very important chapter in this entire writing. Now, for those of you who don't know, just to kind of give a little real quick introduction, we are going over Dion Fortune's The Cosmic Doctrine, which is considered one of the 20th century's greatest works in esotericism. It is, of course, an opinion. I kind of agree with it. It does have a lot of good stuff in it that kind of reshaped how your mind thinks and whatnot. So I'm excited to go over this. And with all that, I'm going to hand this back over to Brother David, who's going to continue leading us into this work.
All right. So probably the most important thing to remember from last time, and it's been a little while, so we'll go over it here again, is that motion and consciousness. So one of the metaphors that Dion Fortune really harped on in one of the previous chapters is that motion and consciousness are two ways of talking about the same thing. That consciousness is motion. Motion is consciousness. And so I know the metaphor that John Michael Greer uses is a pool table. That if you want to think about consciousness sort of as motion, you think about an idea coming into your brain. That's the cue ball, and it gets thrust in and interacts with all the other balls on the table, right? And there are all sorts of various interactions of that new idea being thrust in there, and that generates motion. And again, motion is very important. If we again think back where we learned about the tracks in space, that motion puts down these rhythms, these habits, that it is, if you follow them, it is easier to follow in the tracks that are already laid down for you. And that's important when we start looking at, we're leaving the concept of the greater cosmos now, and we're moving into our tiny little section of the cosmos, which is our solar system. And I think we already mentioned in the last one that Dion Fortune equates the great entity of our solar system as residing in the sun. She refers to it as the solar logos. And so now we're moving away from the concept of you have these traveling atoms and these great entities, and now we're going to be talking about the solar logos and our solar system specifically. And she kind of shifts metaphors here, moving away from physics and going more to psychology. But again, when we want to just remember that motion is consciousness. So when we start talking about the psychology of consciousness here in relation to the great entity, we're also talking about movement. And so once we shift to or I should say, one thing to think about there before we go too much into it is that the creation is, and this sounds counterintuitive, because if we remember back to the cosmos, we have the ring chaos and the ring pass not and the ring cosmos, but actually that creation is happening most vigorously on when we're on the downslope of the ring chaos, because that's when everything is thrust into motion, the equilibrium is upset, and all those cue balls, start interacting and bouncing into each other, and that's where the most vigorous creation is happening. And then once that's done, we start to enter that stage of equilibrium. And that's kind of what brings us then to the psychology of the great entity, because once the great entity starts to reach that equilibrium, it starts to contemplate. But it's not contemplating the cosmos. The cosmos is kind of an unconscious like background to it. It starts to contemplate itself. But remember that we just talked about those tracks in space and the habits. All those things have been imprinted upon the great entity. So even though the great entity is not thinking about the cosmos, it's still thinking, I guess you could say, in terms of the way that the cosmos moves, right? So when it starts to contemplate itself, it starts to create its own little universe in miniature. And what it does there is it uses all of the things that it learned in its journey, and those unconscious thoughts, you could say, become the reality of itself. And so we have the 12 rays, we have the 7 planes, all those things exist within within the great entities universe, because they were things that existed in the greater cosmos. And it's very much again, we've mentioned this before, and we'll say it probably again, that as above, so below, right? So as the cosmos is, so is the great entity, the solar logos of our universe. It's mimicking almost unconsciously the various paths and planes and rays and everything that it encountered. It's recreating in miniature. So then we need to remember that when the great entity was passing through all those different rays and all those different planes, when it finally got thrust back out to the spot where it's going to be, and our great entity is on the 7th plane of existence in the greater cosmos. When it got thrust back out there and finally settled into orbit in that 7th plane, it picked up atoms, as Dion Fortune calls them, from all the other different planes that it passed through, and sort of, I sort of envision it as this great swarm, like swirling about the entity. And one of the important things to note there is that our divine sparks, the seed of your soul, so to speak, is one of those atoms. It's one of those things that was swept out. We didn't have all the great movement that the solar logos had, but we still find our origins in those planes as lesser atoms. And I know that I think it's actually the Latter-day Saints. I wish I could remember the saying. It's something like they're talking about God and the angels. I believe the quote's something like, "What they are, we will become," right? And so, and what they are. No, what? I'm forgetting the exact quote there, but the idea being that then what the solar logos is, as it's contemplating its own existence. Yes, Phil. So Philip asked, would you consider the contemplation of the greater deity similar to samadhi? And I believe the answer to that is yes. The thing that I always find interesting when we start talking about the solar logos and the creation of its own universe, it always comes back down to me anyway, the very Catholic view of God. Because they say, oh, well, he's all knowing, he's all powerful, he's all loving, he has all this power. And it's when you think about what the solar logos has created, right? We exist within its consciousness, and it learns through us. That in that context, it is sort of uh, omnipotent and all powerful. But in the greater scheme of the cosmos, it's just a fraction of the power that the central stillness and the actual creation of the cosmos exerts. Because it's all consciousness of the great entity. It's all internal to it, and all these other there. It's one of an untold number of great entities out there. I always look at it that every star in the sky is its own solar logos, its own god of its solar system. And you just look at the night sky and see that there are untold numbers of them out there. So when you think about it from that perspective, the power that our solar logos wields over us, it feels omnipotent, but it's really not. Yes, thank you, Johnny. That was the quote I was thinking of. What we are is what they were, and what they are is what we will become.
So there's a reading in the book to kind of put some textual context to what she's writing. So we are going over, if we're following along with Greer, chapters 8 and 9, or the end of chapter 8 and 9, according to his work. But I want
9 is like a page, so
yeah, it's real short. But just to kind of touch on some of what she's saying for you all to chew on, think about, because there's some parts I highlighted in my reading. Likewise, the phases of development during which a great entity organizes itself are internal and therefore subjective. They are not carried out under the stimulus of sensation derived from external conditions, but under the stimulus of feelings arising from internal conditions, and the phase corresponding to the phase of existence which a human soul passes through between death and birth. This phase having been completed, a great entity having arrived at the greatest degree of organization which it is capable of with the conditions at its disposal, can go no further. Being organized throughout, each part is affected by and responds to changes in any other part. It is therefore fully conscious, for consciousness is but awareness, and awareness is but reaction to a stimulus. The conditions of its nature, being habitual in their sequence, no longer give rise to conscious stimuli, and the great entity is therefore a consciousness, but nothing of which it can be conscious about except itself. The cosmos, be it noted, being entirely habitual to this entity, forms the conditioning background of its consciousness. So it's only aware of itself at this point. We are talking about basically the birth of God, right? The birth of our God in the great cosmos, one of many stars, the birth of our God. It has then created, by the sensations of its own nature, a concept of itself, of which it is aware, and here then is a novel sensation, and it dwells on it. This is the self-consciousness of a great entity. This is creation, and God made man in his own image and likeness. A universe is a concept in the mind of the great entity. And then towards the end, on page 64 of the Millennium Edition, God, therefore, is omnipotent as far as it is concerned, though himself conditioned by the conditions of the cosmos. Omnipotence means free from the influence of any other conditioning power. Therefore, God, our logos, is free from anything else influencing it at this point. It is the center of, for our intents and purposes, our world, our universe. Infinite means the sum total of the influences toward which an organism is capable of reacting. A universe then is a thought form projected by the mind of God. That's an interesting concept. So when you see we exist in a simulation, we exist in a dream, that's what this is talking about. We exist in the mind of God. He is imagining all of this existing, and so we are. And this is why, from the esoteric standpoint, from the microcosm, from our standpoint, our imagination and our will is so important to develop, because as above, so below. As God above us does, so do we. The relation of the God of a universe to the cosmos, to the universe, he is evolved and conditioned by it. He is its creator and sustainer, both finite and infinite and omnipotent. So that's the end of chapter 8. I'll let David continue. I think some of the text is important just to kind of cover, though, because you need that context. You need that to kind of ground it again in what we're talking about. We're talking about God. We're talking about the Logos, which is God, and he is now awakening to the fact that he is a thing. But he only knows of himself right now. So he's thinking about himself.
Yep. And as I said, going back to what I mentioned just a little while ago, the unfortunate starts. I think it might be in chapter 9 that she starts talking about rather than saying Adam, she starts talking about the divine spark that exists within us, within all of our souls.
She changes the vocabulary. She starts switching back and forth between solar system. It's a metaphor for God. It's in the cosmos. To yes, exactly.
And so our divine spark, and kind of going back to the LDS quote there, the view is not that in Fortune's view, the solar logos is not necessarily he created the existence that we experience, but he didn't create our souls, or that divine spark that is within us. That actually came from the very birth of the cosmos. And so when you look at it from that perspective, in Fortune's view, the solar logos is not like our father. He's not our creator. He's actually our elder sibling, our older brother.
I felt the wave of rage swarming over the internet.
And one other thing that Greer puts emphasis on is that in this particular thing especially is that anybody who's got strong theological opinions on this, you're not required to believe the cosmic doctrine in the sense of like you go to church and believe in God, right? Again, it's a series of metaphors designed to train your brain to think about things that are otherwise very difficult to understand. I think it's probably fair to say that Fortune believed very strongly that these metaphors were, in fact, as close to the truth as you could get. But even if you think of the great entity as a mighty angelic being, or something, and God is actually in the central stillness of the cosmos, like the metaphors still work. There's no loss of information. It doesn't require you to believe specifically as Fortune did. Again, these are metaphors designed to train your mind, not necessarily to inform it. Even if Fortune's view was probably more aligned with that.
Bearing in mind she was a Christian mystic, so she believed strongly in Jesus Christ, and all of her works were dedicated to him. And if you read any of her later books especially, she talks a lot about that.
Right. So she was very much I don't think she was a Catholic necessarily, but she was definitely Christian. I mean, her and I want to say that I think Jesus Christ was one of the masters that she said helped.
Yep, she calls
her.
Him. Yep, Master Jesus. That's what she calls him.
Yep. Helped her write this book, and so again, as above, so below. We've got the 7 planes of existence start to come into creation here. We start to talk a little bit about the influences of other great entities. So if you remember when we and again, I always think of this similar to the solar system that we have, right? If the 7th plane was Jupiter, or whatever the 7th planet is, and you got all these other planets in between you and the central stillness, and so as these other planets, as these other great entities move in front of you and of where you are in the central stillness, and obviously we're out on the 7th plane, so we've got the 6th through the 1st plane of existence, all these great entities in those planes as well, all circling around the central stillness as they move in front of us. And I think we talked a little bit about this last time, that they block the view of the central stillness to us, and so they exert a sort of influence. Upon. What's that?
I said, yeah, their influence. They have their own influence that we are afflicted by, or whatever word you want to use. Afflicted may not be the right one, but influenced by.
Right. And so the atoms, the divine sparks that are more closely aligned to that plane. So remember that I didn't go into too much of the the mathematics of it, but the different atoms from the different planes of existences have different numbers associated to them. And so for example, if an atom that originated from the third plane of existence is here with our solar logos, and a great entity on the third plane moves in front of us, there's a certain pull that's felt by those atoms that are more aligned with that plane, because that's where they originated from. But another thing that Greer makes very careful mention of, though, is that, doesn't matter what plane you're from. It doesn't mean that you're better or less than. It's just it's simply a different origin. So let's see here. So I'm just going to read the last little bit here that Greer said, because I really like what he says at the end here. So each cosmic atom, to be specific, is influenced by the cosmic plane where it orbited for all those ages, and when great entities of that plane come close, the cosmic atoms of that came from that plane are affected by it. Thus, the divine sparks, which is us, or cosmic atoms, aren't simply puppets of the solar logos, the great entity at the heart of their solar system. They have their own independent reactions. At times, they will contend with the solar logos, and the logos will contend with them. And out of this intricate fabric of contention, compromise, and ultimately cooperation, the solar system takes shape and seeks its destiny. Yeah. And through that, we also take shape, spiritually speaking, and seek our destiny.
Because this can be applied at multiple levels, not just the birth of God and the birth of a solar system, but the birth of who we are now.
Yep.
Cool.
I think that's mostly what I had, Chris.
Yeah, that was a shorter reading, and that's fine. So when we go over these books, and some of them are going to be short chapters, and that's good, because no matter how short it is, it'll last you for like a month to think about it. But again, if you want to follow along, I recommend these books. This is the Millennial Edition of the Cosmic Doctrine from Dion Fortune. You can get this on Amazon. And then this is Greer's companion book that goes with it. So you read a chapter here, and he tells you what to read. You read that out of Dion Fortune's book, then you go back to Greer's book, and then you kind of contemplate it all and have a journal and write it down. And you're supposed to think about it. You're supposed to take each chapter like month by month and just think just about that work and how it applies. And these are books that you read, takes a long time, but also that you read multiple times in your life. It's not just something you read once and put on your shelf. So I will give you a sneak peek. This is where it starts to get faster. So up to this point, I was kind of struggling to keep my my consciousness in the reading, but it starts to pick up speed real quick, and it gets really, really cool, because now the system's starting to form, and we're going to actually start to be exposed to the concept of swarms and the concept of like where the angels and the archangels came from, and planetary spirits and all those different things that color the esoteric world, which is what hooked me. I love that. So we will start doing some Q&A here in a moment. I see our chat bubbles filling up, and again, I can't really pull that open, but David can observe those. We will be going into chapter 10 in Greer's book, which covers chapter 10, and it looks like chapter 11 in her book, next meetup, which may be next week. We don't necessarily have to do it next week. We can meet and talk about something else if you want to, but this is all, we can talk about that in the Discord. But yeah, so that'll be starting on page 71 in Greer's book.
So I'll just read some of the stuff we have from the chat here. So Brother Philip says, this sounds similar to the three great outpourings. Human soul is animal form, beginning evolution, pre-human kingdoms of nature through which consciousness evolved. Third is development of seven planes. So that's an oversimplification, but yeah, we're starting to get into that stuff. As Chris said, when we start talking about the swarms, we're really going to get into that stuff.
Yeah, that's where the seven planes start. That's where we start to really understand what the seven planes are. And ultimately, this is a Kabbalistic set of teachings as well, because the Kabbalah teaches about the fall and the rise back up through the planes. They call it something else. It has to do with like hundreds of steps that you have to go up, but it's basically the same frame.
Yeah, so we have Bill saying the universe is mental. It's a Hermetic principle. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously, when we're talking about Dion Fortune's metaphor of movement is consciousness, that obviously that is very much true in her view.
Or that the universe has been created by God in his mind.
Yeah, and the infinite creator, not the same as the logos, which is a subset of it. Yeah, I always think of it like Russian nesting dolls. You've got the big one that created everything, and then underneath that, I almost wonder if, looking at the metaphor again, that what is a solar system? Well, it's kind of like a mini galaxy, which is kind of like a mini universe. So I almost wonder if there's like another step even in there, that there's an even bigger logos that exists within a galactic logos, before you get to the universal logos.
Well, and come down too. You can come down. So we are the logos, and there's atoms spinning around in us like little galaxies, and who knows, into that there could be little mini Dr. Evils inside, whatever Dr. Evil, and then inside of them there are, and inside of them there are. It's just like it goes both ways in potentially infinite directions.
Yeah,
it's fun to think about.
So we have Johnny Christ. The Essenic teaching uses brother and sister between us and Christ inclusive. So again, yeah, we in Dion Fortune's view, God is our older brother. Like we will eventually, provided that we, continue on the path. And for the most part, it's hard to get off of that path. The world the Solar Logos will continue to throw things at you until you learn the lessons that you need to. In that respect, it is infinitely kind. It will give you as many chances as you need to learn those lessons. It takes a very certain kind of refusal to learn to actually get kicked out. Let's see here. So Brother Philip says, Joseph Smith also spoke of understanding the kingdom of God required study into the planetary systems. Oh, that's interesting.
7 liberal arts. What's one of the 7 liberal arts that we profess in Freemasonry? That's astronomy. And it's not just because it was fun to watch the stars.
Yep. So we've got Johnny creation ex nihilo, in Greek the apeiron, creation out of chaos. I mean that kind of goes back to the 3 rings, right? The cosmos, the chaos, and the ring pass not.
Yeah, and something to bear in mind on the discussion of our climb on our ascent. The secret Gospel of John, if you're a Gnostic, which we're talking about Russian nesting dolls. Well, Russian nesting dolls are all about the Gnostic belief, because the Gnostic belief is there's a creator, and then there's the demiurge who created the earth. So there's a hierarchy there. But during our ascent back up, there's two paths you take eventually. It's the long, slow, winding path up, which most of us will take, which takes a long time, but you eventually get there. Or there's the more direct path, which is kind of what we're doing here. It's training our minds to be able to ascend faster. Not necessarily, I don't, maybe that's not a good word for it, but to try to learn the lessons with that very much in, that's our goal. But to do that requires taming your emotions first as humans, both men and women, which in Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism, in the Eastern Star, and all those different orders, it's like the first thing that they teach you is you got to keep those emotions in check. And if you can't keep your emotions in check, that's like a gauge. So you know how, like, if you're cooking a chicken in the oven and you want to know if it's done, you put the thermometer in. Oh, it's not done. It's got to keep cooking. Well, that's one of my tests. If little things still set you off, then I go, oh, I still need to cook in the oven. I'm not ready to be moving beyond that, because obviously I still have work to do where these emotions still control me, right? Before you can start moving up. So that's why these institutions exist. And those are things to keep. If you do things willfully, meaning you live in the moment, you're choosing to do things for a purpose, you stay on that path instead of just wandering aimlessly. Keep your emotions in check when you're tested, and I get tested every day, many times. That's a good gauge for where you sit right now in terms of where you are in the mysteries.
Yeah, and I tend to think of it in the terms very similar as you said with will. That we talked about the winding path that takes a while and the more direct path, and it's to me it's more about seeking out the path, right? Because we learn through our experiences, and that long path, you will get the experiences you need to eventually get to where you need to go. But it's consciously looking for that path. That's the direct path, is that you're making a conscious choice that, I don't want to be meandering about and learning lessons the hard way. Like I want to learn things the right way. I want to do it once and not 100 times before I finally learn the lesson that the world and the Logos and God is trying to teach me.
So one of the things I'm learning about tarot, I was never really strong at, other than I used to, do the divination thing, but tarot was used as a psychoanalysis tool. And now that I'm delved deeper into it through other things, they have this concept called the hero's journey, which is the 22 major arcana. You see me post that in the esoteric channel here a lot. But what to your point, what you just said, if you follow that journey, that's us, starting with the Fool and all the way to the end on that wheel. And once you get to the Hermit, which is card 9, the Hermit means you've gotten all this information, you think you're at a good spot, you're starting to teach people, and then you withdraw. And you withdraw and you contemplate. And then the next card after the Hermit is the Wheel of Fortune. And the Wheel of Fortune is basically finding your path. And it may seem like it's random, because it could be something you've never even considered before. Suddenly this path appears before you. And that is the opening of the path. That's what you were talking about, searching for the path on the hero's journey. And then that takes you to Justice, which is symbolized by Lady Justice sitting between two pillars, which is a common theme, these two magical pillars that you're going to see, and a guard in the middle. Well, that sword that she's carrying is a sword of reasoning, right? To cut away the things you don't need anymore. And the scales are your karmic equilibrium. And when you're ready to go through that journey, she will step aside and you can walk through that portal. But yeah, finding that road, finding that path to see what goes in there. Of course, what leads next is the Hanged Man, which is a whole other dilemma. But yeah, tarot is a fascinating tool for self-reflection and discovery, and I would recommend it. Random little blurb.
Well, and that's probably one of the biggest. You kind of said it right there. Self-reflection. That's probably the biggest thing that if you look out at the world today and all the things that are wrong with it, you got a lot of people that don't know how to self-reflect, and that's as we just talked about with the solar logos, its whole existence is a self-reflection,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why self-reflection through things like meditation, through contemplating the tarot and stuff like that is so important for our own development.
Mm-hmm. Well, mage's rule number 1, know thyself. If you do not know
Mm-hmm.
yourself, you're not ready yet. And that's part of mastering your emotions and all that other stuff too. So what else we got in the chat? Is everyone quiet?
I think that's mostly it. We had some very cool picture that Philip posted.
Should I be afraid?
You should always be afraid.
I know. All right.
Did you have any questions on your stream?
No, we just have some random comments talking about chicks turning into chickens. Very beautiful. All right. Well, if we don't have anything else,
All right.
we'll go ahead and wrap this up, and we'll do our traditional Q&A afterwards with everyone. For those of you watching, thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, leave some comments. Love to see it. And we will be doing this again soon with the next portion of the Cosmic Doctrine. So if there's anything else you'd like to see or talk about, let me know. Leave a comment in the discussion. And until then, I will see you later.